Hey, welcome back to Lick of the Week videos. We've been looking at theory and its application to the banjo for quite a while now. The last two videos, to be specific, we looked at what a major scale formula is. We looked at G major scale for the example, and then we found out through our examination of the G scale that an E minor scale actually is derived from G major. So every time you learn a major scale, and there are 12 major scales, there are also 12 minor scales that were related to the major. So every time you learn a major scale, you have a minor scale basically built in. So it's a different arrangement of the same scale, which brings us logically around to this topic, which is modes. Modes is just a fancy theory term for a different arrangement of a scale. So just like we found out for G and E minor, that if we go to the sixth note of a G scale, which is an E note, G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, the E note is the starting point for an E minor scale, but we're still inside the parameters of a G major scale. We're just starting and stopping on an E note. So it's just a different arrangement of the same G scale that you learn, which is exactly what modes are. Now there's a simple little sentence that a guitar player buddy of mine taught me years ago, and this is the sentence: I don't particularly like my aunt's lasagna. And which is not true for me, because I like my aunt's lasagna. It's actually pretty delicious. But anyway, what happens is, it's a little phrase that maybe that he was taught in music class that helped him memorize the names of the modes and the order they come in. So each first letter of each word in that sentence represents Greek letter names. Now don't ask me why they're Greek. I don't want to get into that. I'm not really up on my Greek. But let's just go ahead and assume that the Greek names are right and that's what we're going to use. How do you memorize the Greek names, and how do you know what order they're in? Well, if you memorize this sentence, I don't particularly like my aunt's lasagna, you get not only a prefix letter that tells you what the Greek name is, but it gives you the exact order they appear in. And I'm going to put them on the screen here. We have Ionian, don't, the D represents Dorian, particularly is Phrygian with a P. I don't particularly like, L is Lydian. I don't particularly like my, M represents Mixolydian. I don't particularly like my aunt's, Aeolian, and lasagna is Locrian. So what we have is, I don't particularly like my aunt's lasagna. We have 7 modes, and if we want to kind of examine this a little closely, we can look at the G scale. So let's do this in this video. We'll look at the G scale. Now here's what happens with those Greek letter names: Ionian, Dorian, Phrygian, Lydian, Mixolydian, Aeolian, and Locrian are fixated, or I shouldn't say fixated, there are Greek names that are cemented in place and they don't move. So if you wanted to look at any scale, we're just using G for the example, and you wanted to arrange G scale like normal, G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, G, and then you could put Ionian, Dorian, Phrygian, Lydian, Mixolydian, Aeolian, and Locrian directly over those 7 scale notes. That would show you the location or the starting point for a different set of G scale notes. So if I wanted to go anywhere inside the confines of a G scale and start, let's say I wanted to start on the second note of a G scale, G, A. What I would do is have to remember that arrangement of the modes, Ionian, Dorian. That means A, the second note of a G scale, if I started and ended there, that actually would be an A Dorian mode of a G scale. Now this is where the confusion comes in, because when I say A Dorian, most people when they're first learning these things, they think A Dorian. Okay, A, that would be the A major scale, right? So I'm looking at the second note of an A scale, or A Dorian. Like, no. What you have to remember is those mode names never change position. Ionian is always the first scale mode. The second note in a scale represented by Dorian. Phrygian is always the third. Lydian is always the fourth. Mixolydian is always the fifth. Aeolian is always sixth. Locrian is always 7. And you just plug in the scale that you're playing or that you're working on. So if I wanted to start on the second note of a G scale, G, A, since that A note represents the second interval in the G scale, the second position, that means I'm going to start on an A, go through the G scale notes again until I arrive at another A. So I've made up a subset of G scale notes, but I'm going to call that A Dorian because it's the second mode of a G scale. So in other words, if I said, let's say for an example, I want to play a G Dorian scale, what that means is I need to locate a scale that has G as its second note. So G Dorian represents G being the second note of some kind of scale. And we know it can't be a G scale because G is the first note of a G scale. It would actually be F. So if I look at an F scale, F, G, G is the second note of an F scale. So if I said I'm going to play a G Dorian scale, that means I'm actually playing the second mode of an F scale. Now I know this seems kind of confusing at first, but if you practice this long enough, I think you'll really get it. So the first starting point for understanding modes is memorizing the names in the order they come in. So don't forget that I don't particularly like my aunt's lasagna. Ionian, Dorian, Phrygian, Lydian, Mixolydian, Aeolian, and Locrian being represented by the first letter of each word. Now let's use the G scale. I'm looking at our time on the clock here, 6:30. Maybe we'll have time to do this. Let's see if we can run through each mode of the G scale and give it its proper mode name. Ionian refers to the first note, so we know that's G. G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, G. That's G Ionian. The second mode of a G scale would start and end on an A. So A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, G, A. That would be A Dorian, or the second mode of a G scale. B is the third note, so that would be Phrygian, so it would be B, C, D, E, F sharp, G, A, B. So that would be B Phrygian, or the third mode of a G scale. Okay, now C is the fourth note, so we start and end there, still working in a G scale, but this would be C Lydian, C, D, E, F sharp, G, A, B, C. Different arrangement, but we'll call that C Lydian as a mode of the G scale. D is Mixolydian, D Mixolydian, D, E, F sharp, G, A, B, C, D. So that would be D Mixolydian mode. Aeolian mode, that's the same thing as relative minor that we did in the last video. Starts with an E note and ends on an E note. So we'd call this E Aeolian, E, F sharp, G, A, B, C, D, E. E Aeolian. And then the last mode of a G scale would be the F sharp note, seventh note of the scale. We'd call that F sharp Locrian. F sharp, G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp. And it doesn't really matter how you play it on the fingerboard as long as they're in that proper order in the same octave range. They can't be wrong. So what we just played is all 7 modes of the G major scale. So to reinforce this, and we're doing pretty good on time, to reinforce this you need to just practice each one individually. G Ionian, then go to the second note, which would be A, and call that A Dorian, because Dorian's always the second mode. Then go to the third note, B, and you'd call that a Phrygian mode, B Phrygian, B, B, C, D, E, F sharp, G, A, B, and then continue to go through the modes until you've played all 7. And remember now, this applies to every scale you play. We're just using G for the example. So the modes represent the starting point for a different set of scale notes. Now, musically speaking, how would you use those? You can use those to solo over chords in the key that you're playing in. It's basically analogous to a painter having 5 colors to paint with versus 30 colors to paint with. So having 7 modes of a G scale gives you a lot more options as far as how to combine notes to solo. So maybe in the next video we'll take a look at how we can play those notes over the chords and or soloing. Thanks. See you next time.